Good afternoon. I'm Bill Case, and this is the latest in our series of oral histories. And with me today is John Clark, who is doing the videography, and Lisa, my wife, is with us too. This is January 23rd, 2013. We are very privileged to have with us one of the German Village area's first realtors, who has a lot to do with the marketing of German Village in her time here. Welcome, Virginia Welch.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here. And you told us you just are celebrating your 52nd year in real estate here, selling real estate in German Village, right?
Yes, of course I don't really sell, the last year or two, but I do take care of rentals and restorations yet.
So that goes, since we're here in 2013, you started in 1961, that time
Yes.
frame? And I think you said that's when you got your license.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about you grew up in both Upper Arlington and then New Hampshire, I guess.
Right.
And then...
Now I'm real old.
Well, we're all getting there. So...
But I always loved old houses.
And I think you said you had a great interest in architecture.
Right. Loved old houses and any kind of buildings that were, interesting and very, very old.
And you told us that you were basically a Marble Cliff housewife until a time occurred when your husband got sick.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, that was back, I can't even remember now, and I had 3 little children, and he was diagnosed and was never really out of hospitalization, even until a few years ago.
And then you had to help take care of the family.
Well, right, I had to learn some kind of living. Had to learn to, to learn something that I'd like to do, and I loved architecture and old homes.
So how'd you get into real estate?
Well, I saw an ad in the paper, and then I'd heard about German Village, about the houses and what was going on, and they would talk about it in the newspaper. So I wanted to come down and take a look at it, and I just loved it.
You love the architecture.
Mm-hmm. The old houses. There was so much to be done.
So then I take it at some point you got your license?
1961, March.
And from what you told us earlier, I gather you after an initial start, you were pretty much on your own from there on in.
Oh, yes. I was always mostly the broker after, you get your first year with someone else, to learn. And the first house I sold was the Corn Crib.
Tell us about the Corn Crib.
It was done by Frank Fetch. He had renovated it, which was, how many years ago?
And just for the record, I think, wasn't this the first house that Frank Fetch renovated?
I think so, yes, if I recall. And that's at, what was that exact address?
Was it West Columbus somewhere?
31, it's 31 West Columbus Street, 31 West Columbus.
Why did they call it the Corn Crib?
Well, because it was a corn crib, and then he made it into like an apartment or a little house to rent.
And this was no routine first sale for you, was it?
Oh, no.
Tell us that story.
It turned out to be real fascinating, but also very scary. I had it for sale for some reason or other, but I can't remember that exactly. But at the corner of Broad and High was, I believe, the Deschler Hotel.
Sure.
And in front was either the drugstore of Walgreens. And on the news one Saturday evening, I don't know if it was television, radio, I'm not sure, but there was a murder, they said, and apparently it was in this little house, and it turned out to be the pharmacist apparently had killed his wife. I don't remember if she did him, or I believe he killed her in that little house on 30 Columbus Street.
So the very house that Frank Fetch restored is the one where a murder occurred.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And now you were being asked to do something with that house right after the
Right
murder?
away, apparently they must have called me to sell it, and I just don't remember the exact about it. But then I had clients by the name of Klein Myers who owned Burwell's, and they loved different houses, and she was interested in getting into the village. And when she heard about that, she called and says, "Oh, I want to buy it, and we want to key and go there and have breakfast Sunday morning." And this was Saturday night.
Did that surprise you a little bit?
Oh, I was
Somebody
shocked, and I did not want to go in. I was afraid.
So fresh on a murder.
But she went, and they bought the property, and it's still there.
Now, Burwell's was what was that?
A nursery,
So
a
they,
huge nursery out on East Main Street.
and you established a relationship with them?
I had known them apparently for a while. I believe they was looking at properties, but I hadn't sold them anything until this particular one. And I got them interested in the village by that, in German Village, and they did purchase several and restored them.
And from what you and I talked about earlier, it sounds like you kind of jumped in both feet into village activities to kind of, and that helped your business, of course, and was a good thing.
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't know any better. It was just a lot of fun. Hard work, but a lot of fun, and seeing all these houses emerge from just some of the very bad conditions to beautiful dwellings.
Were you involved in some of the early house and garden tours?
Oh, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, we had a candlelight tour also, which we would have once a year, and it would be like in the evening, and was usually on a Sunday evening, and it was very well taken, people loved it.
And we're putting in on the screen right now it looks like your advertisement for the Backyards by Candlelight tour. So you were really involved in that.
Oh, right. And then, of course,
That was in the September timeframe.
I think so, yes. And I was always doing for all of the house and garden tour. I would do the signs for those every year in June.
Well, and I think you said that on Livingston there.
Livingston and
you put
Third.
a big billboard up at Livingston and Third.
I did that for many years
And
to
there's-
advertise the house and garden tour.
And so here we have your ad, June 25th, House and Garden Tour. So you were into it in a big way.
Well, I guess I was.
Were you involved in the actual, aside from advertising, did you help with the tours? Or
Oh, yes, worked in the houses, when we had people, to show things, what's going on. Absolutely.
were you involved in the pre-tours also?
Not so much lately. Then I was, because we used to have them. There was some at night, and we would go around in carriages. That was interesting.
And tell us a little bit more, because I think a lot of people have forgotten about the Backyards by Candlelight tour in September. Tell us what you would have seen if you'd gone on one of those tours.
Well, it was very interesting, and I think that we had, sometimes we had carriages, and they would stop at these houses, and of course we had to buy tickets. We had tickets. They were not expensive. I don't know, $10, $20, but we had these here particular stops, and they would get off and go to the next house. And now it evolved into, as you know, the German Village has these fancy dinners before the house and garden tour. So it kind of, I think, evolved from that.
When you first got in real estate here, some of your friends and other realtors you talked to had some question why you were coming down here.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, they just thought I was crazy.
And why was that?
Well, because it didn't look to me like you could sell anything, because, it was in, pretty bad repair, and so there was no market, they didn't think, for it. And, of course, it did take a little time to get off, but I loved it.
Did you have much competition in the early days?
No, not at all. Not at all. The only realtor down here was Mr. Carotas, who had an insurance company there on 3rd Street, and he had a real estate license.
So you kind of were
I was about the only one, if I remember, at that time.
There's a lot down here now.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Couldn't count all of them.
You go back far enough that you remember some of the early great people in German Village. Of course, Frank Fetch. Tell us about Frank and any involvement you had with him.
Oh, well, he was very interesting, very dedicated. He lived in Gahanna, but he loved the village. But I don't think he cared much for women in business like me.
And why?
I don't know why, but
you said that you tried to apply a few times for membership, but you never showed up on the ranks?
That first few years, but whether that was anything to do, I don't know. But anyway, it was interesting.
There's another gentleman I haven't heard too much about who you said was very instrumental in the early days, Colonel Allen?
Yes, that was probably there in the 60s. And he was involved with the Oktoberfest and Bill Schur. And when we had the Oktoberfest down in Schiller Park. And he was also, very involved with the village. And he lived on Sycamore Street there between 3rd and High.
And you also mentioned we're doing this interview in the Schur room. You knew Bill Schur pretty well.
Oh, yes, they were lovely people. Lovely.
And tell us of his involvement and his wife's in the...
Oh, he's very dedicated, and so was she. And she worked in the village office. Very dedicated.
And I think you said Mr. Schur is on the left and Miss...
And that is Jürgen Lemke on the right. And then, what's his name? Can't
Kientz.
think at the moment.
Phil Keynes.
Phil Kientz there.
Okay.
And that was down at the Oktoberfest, I
So we
believe.
have Mr. Schur on the left, Mr. Kientz in the middle, and I'm sorry, I forget the one on the right. Who was the gentleman on the right?
Jürgen Lemke, that had
Lemke.
Jürgen's Bakery.
Okay, all right. So those are some of the great early people. And so tell us about, I think one of the things that I was struck by in the information you brought us was you did quite a bit of preparation of documentation to help market German Village in your real estate career.
The maps, I did make the maps up, and like Schmitz used to sell them, and then I would give them to mostly I did get them for my customers, and I mailed them all over and to other parts of the city and country, and so they would come and visit, of course.
Yeah, we just are showing a walking, biking tour map that you had prepared, and it's got some buildings on here that aren't what they are now. Like we see the Golden Eagle ice cream, for example, on the upper right of this.
And that was a blacksmith shop many years ago.
And that's now G. Michael's restaurant.
Restaurant, yes. Uh-huh.
Right. And we see the Old World Bazaar on the bottom right. Tell us about that building.
Oh, that was a fantastic building. It was originally the trolley barn, which was the Columbus Trolleys. And that was from one street to the other, being City Park to High Street.
All right.
And it went through the building went from City Park to Pearl. But then they could go on out to High Street.
We'll show you a picture of that in a moment. We also see Marnie's Bric-a-Brac at 631 South 3rd Street.
That is now the book loft.
Okay.
That is now the book loft. And that was interesting, that building, when I sold it. We did not realize, nor the attorneys, that the buildings next door went with it. And so at the closing, then when the people gave them the keys, this was all of this property that went with it next door, which is now 3 apartments.
And what about the village store that you have on this map at
Oh.
911 City Park? What's
Now-
that now?
It is some kind of a shop still. It's marvelous. And the man that did that was, I think, WBNS TV, one of the people that, worked there and was interested in the village. And I could get all these people interested in different things, and they'd come down and they would renovate, a shop and get into business. And I can't think of his name at the moment, but he was with WBNS TV.
You also handed us a newspaper that looks like maybe the Society published, the German Villager. Do you remember that?
Yes, uh-huh.
And
Everybody wrote it, and we paid to have our ad in it.
so
and,
that was both informational and a little advertising as well.
Right, and it gave, to the people that were members.
Now, you also, we have a picture of you. I think you said is this the one in front of the Golden Eagle?
Oh, yes, uh-huh. Now
That's you a few years ago.
many years ago. and that was the blacksmith shop. And then it became, when I sold it, it went into the ice cream shop. Do you recall that?
Yes.
It was the ice cream shop, and which is showing there.
And you were also doing a little marketing during the Oktoberfest as well, were you not?
Well, that was many years ago down in the Schiller Park.
We have a picture that you've kept from what it says the first Oktoberfest at Schiller Park, and that's you in the golf cart there, right?
Right, and we had a parade down down Third Street.
What was that?
Sure, and all of them.
What was that parade like?
Well, it was interesting. We had the flags, and we had all these people marching. Plus, we had the golf carts with people riding in them. And then down there, of course, we had all kinds of exhibits. And I had like cider to sell, and I made candy apples and, things of that. And they would stand in line to get the cider, which farmers would bring in. That was real interesting.
And so would the merchants be in the parade like you were here?
Some of them might be.
Great.
But oh yes, everybody was in the parade.
And the Oktoberfest, that must have taken a lot of planning since it was the first one. Were you involved in that at all?
Oh yes, because we had to get it together, and we had the musicians and the that's what it was all about, the dancing and the tent, and it was just great.
Do you remember who was kind of in charge of it back then?
Not exactly who would have been, but I think it was Bill Schur and all these here people that you've been talking about.
Sure.
It was, and Colonel Allen and those particular ones that started.
You've got some great pictures for when the Oktoberfest moved down. I think that's in the
2001.
Yeah,
it was just down there on Front Street once, I think.
Kind of in the brewery area. Yes.
And that was 2001.
All right. And you had your own office, and I believe you still have it today on Hoster.
Right.
And that's kind of an interesting building too, isn't it?
Oh, it very.
Tell us about that.
Well, it was, I don't know where those pictures are at the moment, but it was in very bad repair. Now I have a driveway beside it, and it was kind of built up on a hill, and it was like a 2-story brick, and it didn't have a porch or anything like that. And so then nobody wanted to buy it because it was in pretty bad repair. Sometimes when they were very bad, people would be afraid, the structurally. But it never bothered me. I just loved trying to find out. I'd get an architect and try to find out what could be done. And I'll never forget the one there at 628 South 3rd, which is beside the book loft now, that little house I restored. And Bill Miller, who was an attorney, and Margaret, they lived down here, and I sold them several homes. And he was a patent attorney.
Okay.
And they loved the village. So he loved the little house when I got it for sale. But the back, he said, oh, I'm afraid that's going to fall off. And I said, that could be fixed. And I mean, he had done several houses, so I couldn't understand why he would be afraid of it. And he said, well, if you buy it and restore it, he said, then we'll move in. Well, I thought, that's kind of odd. I don't know if I want to do that, And, but anyway, I did, and they moved in, and they bought it. And I said, the only way I'm going to do that is if you move and you sell it back to me. And which they did. And it's right beside, it's a beautiful 1-story Dutch brick. And one time I sold it after that to Bob Evans' daughter, the man that had the restaurant.
Sure.
And he came and stayed with him and slept upstairs in the little loft.
How many homes did you restore?
Oh, well, I don't know exactly.
But you were part of that restoration effort that's still going on.
Oh, yes, I was always wanting to, when somebody didn't want something or they thought it was so terrible that you couldn't do, then I said, well, I'll do it.
I think you said that you were a little concerned about competing with your own customers, so you would only be able to get those properties that no one else wanted.
Right. Absolutely.
But one property you were able to market several times, and is one of the most mysterious buildings in the village, is the Schwartz Castle.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Oh, I love that building. Of course, you know the history of it. And it was built, was it back in, I can't think now at the moment, just when it was built. But it was in the newspaper quite a bit because there was murders in it and all kinds of things, and it did go in disrepair. But before that, there was a druggist that moved in from, I forgot what country it was, Germany, I believe. And he came over and restored it, and I understand he used to sunbathe up there on the round eight-sided affair.
You told us that Ben Hayes, who was the great reporter for the Dispatch, walked up with you to the top of the tower there. And,
Right, the eight-sided tower.
There was an article that we have a date on it from the Dispatch. Ben Hayes wrote on April 8, 1965, and he refers to the attractive Virginia Welch, who don't mean to make you blush, but who accompanied Ben on his tour. So this is at a time when you were no doubt marketing the property. So
right, I had well, it was mysterious because of all the murders and the different things. Back then, of course, it was so different than now. I mean, that was just unusual, you know, to know things like that was going on in the downtown area. So anyway, so he said, well, I'll take a flag and we'll go up there. And so then it was in the newspaper, and it kind of went all over the country.
Well, getting that stuff in the paper didn't hurt marketing efforts, did it?
Probably not, and as I said,
That's great.
I think I sold it 3 times, I think. I believe I did. And the last time I sold it was to Bob Geese, who was, and I can't think of the other fella, that did the Anheuser-Busch. They did together. They worked on it, and it was very tireless because they had to go to city council, and they had never had anything like that to renovate and restore because it was, you could see how it was involved. But they did a magnificent job of restoration.
Other folks that you did some business with and helped bring to the village, a big contribution here, Fred and Howard.
Oh, yes, uh-huh.
You said the first home you sold them was in Injun Village.
Well, they lived out on near St. Mary's. I can't think of that street or
Ohio
road.
Dominican?
Yes, uh-huh.
All right.
They lived there, and it was like a farm, but it looked exactly like a German village 2-story house. And they came in and they wanted to get to the village, and so then they got into the Hausfrau Haven building there on South 3rd Street, and they actually was going into the business like for the washateria, and it's still there.
And I think you said they weren't just business friends, they were good friends of yours.
Oh, excellent. And of course, they bought many, many properties and restored them. And of course, they loved the village. They marketed it and from all over the world. And they just was well known over Columbus, and we sure miss them.
And they did so in a way that was fun.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
We were talking about, tell us about the incident where they planted the tree in the street. What was that all about?
Oh, one time when we was trying to get the city to repair the brick streets, and they put that in the middle so that there couldn't be any vehicular traffic.
He knew how to draw attention to a problem.
Right.
I believe you also knew another gentleman who I knew as an attorney and who will be known to anybody who practiced law in this town, the Honorable Joseph Canary.
Joseph P. Canary, right.
Tell us about your
Well,
relationship with Joe.
They lived on City Park, 615 City Park Avenue, across from the book loft. And he married Bernice, and that's where they first lived. And I don't know for how many years, but he owned the property on either side also. And that was interesting, but he would never spend any money to, to restore them like we would think about it. He was very stingy when it came to that. I mean, they were dear friends, but I'm just saying, like, for example, at Beck and Forth, there was a 4-family, I don't know if I sold it to him or what, but it was a terribly old 4 units. And one day he got a call when he was down on the bench that one of the tenants elderly gentleman called and told him there was a dire emergency and that he would have to come down right away. So he thought somebody was badly hurt. So he quickly got off the bench, came down, and the gentleman, the only thing was hurting or bothering him, he lost his false teeth in the toilet, which was one of these outhouses at Beck and Forth Street.
Not everybody's had that experience.
And also in
particularly
that
now.
particular building, there was a lady that lived, and she had these roosters, and they would crow in the morning and wake you up. That was interesting.
Well, you told us about the area at near Schmitz where the
Abattoir,
Tell us about
which
the
is a
abattoir.
slaughterhouse, and that was on Lozelle, right? Lozelle. And one day, the cattle got out, and they were into the street, which is almost at the corner of Lozelle and Columbus. And so then we had to get our cars and get them across those 3 corners until they could get them back in the little barn. That was interesting. But they did used to slaughter I guess it was the Jewish, because they call it an abattoir,
All right.
which is actually a slaughterhouse. And of course, the building's still there.
No one could believe that sort of thing was just happening in the last 50 years here.
Right.
But it did.
And it's been made into a beautiful little dwelling.
You also gave us another document, which we didn't talk about earlier, the Das Schreiben. It was a newsletter that the Society published. This one's dated August of 1966. Frank Fetch signed it as the president. I noted in here that the gross receipts of the House and Garden Tour that year were $9,270. But they had low expenses. They netted out $65.54, so not too bad. But
We knew how to.
a smaller House and Garden Tour than we have now. You showed me several other pictures. What about the trolley house?
You mean the Old World Bazaar?
Yes.
Which was at 555 City Park Avenue. And that building, which was a trolley barn, and it was the city of Columbus. And the trolleys would come in on City Park and then go straight through to High Street. Well, then after they didn't have the trolleys anymore, then it was made into, as you might see there, called Walker's Car Wash. And so you could come from one side of the building, which would be on Pearl Street, come straight through to City Park and go on around, and you'd have the car wash was in there. That was interesting. And then I sold it, and it was made into the Old World Bazaar, which was a wonderful collection of 10 to 12 shops. It was a real beautiful shopping center.
And what is that used for now?
It's attorneys' offices, and they've beautifully kept it restored also. And that's 555 City Park.
We'll just go through some of these other photographs of important buildings you were involved with. How about this one? Which was this one?
Oh, well, this is at the corner of Columbus and Lozelle, and that was where he used to do the roofing company. I can't think of the name of it, the roofing company. And it was made into this house, and I sold it and a couple of times, actually. And I remember the first attorneys, they dearly loved it, and then one of them passed away, and I sold it. I think the same people, I don't know if it's the doctors are there, but the same people are there, and it's very interesting. And that's across what used to be the German village. It wasn't the German village house, but it was a building there that they used as kind of a reception and interesting home. And I have a picture of that in there somewhere.
You have some other great pictures here. Let's have you identify this one.
Well, that's the building there at Jurgen's Konditorei, which
Right.
is the original. I'm trying to remember. I think it says 1884 on it. Is that 1884?
I can't.
I think
it looks that like the way. It doesn't quite look that way today, does it? A little different.
No, it's 1884, and then it was restored, and Jurgen's Klemke. They called it their Konditorei, which was a bakery and restaurant. It is still there today. Wonderful building. And that's on South 4th.
And we have another great picture here that I'd like to show you that had another use. What was that building?
Oh, well, the grocery store that was there on City Park, and this picture was November 65, I must have sold it. And now, of course, it is the bookstore,
Let's show
bookshop.
that.
And that goes from one street to the other. It goes from City Park to 3rd Street, and it's known as the Book Loft, L-O-F-T, the Book Loft.
And in the lower right, we have the blacksmith shop.
Well, that was before the, there at 3rd and, you know, where.
That's where G. Michaels is now?
Yes, uh-huh.
All right.
And that was a blacksmith shop, and I did have original pictures of that.
Was it a blacksmith shop when you came to
Yes,
the village?
Yes, they had those horses out in front and things. I had pictures of them.
You saw horses even in the 1960s?
They would come there, some people.
I'll be darned.
Absolutely.
You wonder where they came from.
Well, down on High Street where some of the farms were.
Okay, tell us about the
Well,
one you have now.
The 1800s it was built, and it's the corner of Beck and Lozelle. And I understand it was used as a, like a beer place. What did they call them then?
A speakeasy?
Right.
Or tavern?
It was a
Saloon?
tavern, but it was a different name. But the upstairs was like for lodging, and then the first floor, which is like a living room now, plus a library, and the middle room, which has a beautiful brick wall, which is like whitewashed, and then across the back is the kitchen. And then upstairs was 2 huge rooms and bath, and a half bath on the first floor. And then that tripod, the garden has won lots of awards. It's just about 8 foot long.
It's kind of a unique property the way that it's
Very,
kind of three-sided there, isn't it?
And it's very interesting because there is no ground there at all. I mean, it's hardly enough to put a table or chair in the garden. And yet the city of Columbus has quite a bit of taxes on it.
Was the lack of parking in a lot of these homes, did it make it difficult to sell?
Well, then, no, because, see, there wasn't people having 2 cars and all these large, vehicles.
So it wasn't as crowded down there?
No, not at all, not at all. But now you see the larger vehicles plus a lot of people that have 2. And of course, there isn't that many garages. And across the street from that was the broom factory,
The broom factory?
the one that's right across the street from it.
Okay, so there were more commercial uses for sure.
Oh, when home industry is what it was about at that time. Home industries.
Your contributions to the village were recognized by the society in 1974. You got a certificate of appreciation which Mr. Schuer signed. You remember that?
Oh, all right.
Well, that's a great award.
They were very appreciative people.
Well, that's the way the society has tried to be. It's a great relationship with all the folks who've contributed so much, and you've contributed as much as anybody.
Well, I loved it, and I love all the buildings and everything that went with it.
Tell us, I didn't ask you this when we prepared, but I'm going to take a chance anyway. Tell me what the village has meant to you in your life.
Well, everything, actually. It's my life, because that's all I know. And that's how many years now? 61 or 2?
52.
52,
Yeah.
right, 52, because it was 1960. So, and of course, I have restored several properties. And I have the Hoster Street and the Beck Street, and then I have the little Dutch double at the corner of Columbus and Mohawk.
What was the most satisfying thing you've done down here, if you could remember just one thing?
Well, seeing that the old castle was restored, seeing that was done on such a scale that was like it should have been done.
And
It
you
was done.
were involved in restoring it?
Well, I certainly didn't, or wasn't anything to do with it, except that I watched it closely and was dear friends with the buyers. And and watched it very closely and was involved because it took a great deal of perseverance to get that done, because nothing had been, with the city to know what to do and to be able to put things together like it should be.
You also said that in the early days you assisted some in helping putting this German village on the National Historic Register.
Yes, that was something that, that we did want to do right away, and it was easy to do, actually. It wasn't that difficult because it was so well done and showed that it was going to really be fascinating.
And steps like that help make this a unique place.
I think so. Of course, there's so many of those areas now that are on the National Register, but I think we were probably the first in the area in Columbus.
Virginia, you shared us a wealth of information which we've enjoyed, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Okay.